The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden streaks across the shimmering water of the Magnolia Creek apartment pool. The late afternoon heat was thick, but the occasional breeze carried a coolness that made the setting almost perfect. Michael Carter, a 32-year-old software engineer, reclined on a poolside lounger, savoring the rare moment of stillness. His life was a blur of deadlines and long nights in front of glowing screens. But today was different. Today was for him. He took a sip of his ice-cold lemonade, letting the condensation from the glass cool his fingertips. A book lay open on his lap, though his mind drifted more toward the sensation of peace than the words on the page. He had earned this moment. Then he heard it, the sound of approaching footsteps. Michael barely glanced up at first. Residents came and went from the pool all the time. But something about the way the footsteps slowed near his chair made him pause. He turned his head slightly, just in time to see a woman standing over him, her shadow stretching across his lounge chair. She was in her mid-50s, with precisely styled blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, and the kind of posture that suggested she had never questioned her place in the world. He had seen her before, passing through the apartment complex, but they had never exchanged a single word. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the humid air. "Do you live here?" Michael blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the directness of the question. He sat up slightly, resting his forearm on his knee. "Yes, I do." "Really?" she pressed, narrowing her eyes. "Because I've never seen you before." "Are you sure you're not visiting someone?" Michael's stomach tightened. He knew this game. He had played it before. He had seen it play out in grocery stores, office buildings, even parks. "I'm sure," he replied, keeping his voice even. "Apartment 304. I've lived here for 2 years." Her lips pursed, and she folded her arms across her chest as if his answer was unsatisfactory. "If that's true, then you should have your key card. Let's see it." Michael felt a slow burn of frustration rise in his chest. He wasn't going to let her dictate his afternoon. He had nothing to prove. "I'm not obligated to show you anything," he said, his voice calm but firm. "If you have an issue, feel free to contact management." The woman's face flushed with indignation. "I will," she snapped, already pulling out her phone. "I'm calling security right now." Michael sighed and leaned back into his chair. He wasn't in the mood for drama, but it seemed he didn't have a choice. Across the pool, a few other residents had begun to take notice. Some exchanged glances. Others subtly pulled out their phones. The tension in the air thickened. Michael kept his gaze steady, refusing to let her rattle him. He wasn't doing anything wrong, and he knew it. But that didn't mean she would back down. The woman stepped aside, raising her voice as she spoke into her phone, making sure everyone could hear. "Yes, I'm at the pool, and there's someone here who shouldn't be. No, he says he lives here, but I've never seen him before. I need someone to come down immediately." Michael could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on him. The onlookers weren't just watching. They were processing. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious. A few openly disapproved. A young couple sitting on the far side whispered to each other, while an older man in swim trunks shook his head slightly. But no one intervened. The woman turned back to him, her phone still in her hand. "You could have avoided all this if you'd just shown me your key card," she said, folding her arms like she had just won some invisible battle. Michael met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "I don't owe you anything," he said simply. Her lips tightened. "People like you think you can do whatever you want," she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for him to hear. Michael's jaw clenched. He wasn't naive. He understood exactly what she meant by people like you. But he refused to take the bait. Instead, he shifted his gaze back to his book, flipping a page as if her words were nothing more than background noise. Minutes later, a uniformed security guard appeared at the entrance of the pool area. He was young, probably mid-20s, his expression hesitant as he surveyed the scene. The woman waved him over enthusiastically. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," she exclaimed, gesturing toward Michael. "This man refuses to leave. He claims he lives here, but I'm certain he doesn't. He wouldn't even show me his key card." The guard approached Michael, who set his book down and stood up. He was taller than both the woman and the guard, his presence suddenly undeniable. "I do live here," Michael said, his voice steady but firm. "Apartment 304. You can check with management if you need to." The guard hesitated, glancing between Michael and the woman. "Sir, do you have your key card with you?" Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He flipped it open, revealing not just his key card but also his driver's license, which displayed the same address as the complex. "Here you go," Michael said, holding it up for the guard to inspect. The guard nodded, his face flushing slightly. "That checks out," he said, handing it back. "Sorry for the trouble, sir." The woman's face twisted in disbelief. "Wait, you're just going to take his word for it?" she demanded. The guard straightened. "Ma'am, he provided the necessary proof. There's nothing else to discuss." The crowd, which had been silently observing until now, began to stir. A few people murmured. The young couple from earlier gave Michael a small nod of approval. But before the situation could fully dissolve, a voice rang out from the other side of the pool. "Enough is enough." All heads turned toward the unexpected speaker. An older woman, dressed in a floral sundress and a wide-brimmed hat, rose from her chair. Her voice was calm, but her presence commanded attention. Michael recognized her. Eleanor Thompson, a longtime resident of Magnolia Creek. Someone known for her no-nonsense demeanor. "Excuse me," Eleanor said as she walked toward the small crowd, her gaze fixed on the woman. "But this isn't the first time this has happened. And I think it's about time someone said something." The accusing woman spun around, caught off guard. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said defensively. Eleanor's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Oh, don't play coy." Michael watched as the power shifted in the conversation, and for the first time since this all began, he felt something close to relief. This wasn't over. But now he wasn't alone. A heavy silence settled over the pool area. The tension, once focused solely on Michael, now shifted to the woman standing stiffly beside the security guard. Her fingers curled tightly around her phone, knuckles pale against the sunlit air. Eleanor stepped forward, her floral sundress swaying slightly with each measured step. Though she was past 60, there was nothing frail about her presence. Her sharp eyes, barely hidden beneath the brim of her wide sun hat, locked onto the woman who had started it all. "You have been harassing people in this complex for months," Eleanor said, her voice crisp and unwavering, "and we're all tired of it." The woman's posture stiffened. Her lips parted, a protest forming, but Eleanor wasn't finished. "Just last week, you accused the delivery driver of loitering because he took a lunch break in his truck. And before that, you called the cops on those college kids moving into their apartment because they looked suspicious." Eleanor's gaze darkened. "Let's not forget the time you tried to get the maintenance man fired because you thought he was snooping around." The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. A few residents nodded. Others exchanged glances, recalling the incidents Eleanor had just listed. The woman swallowed hard. That's not true. I was just making sure everything was safe around here. Safe? Eleanor tilted her head. Safe from what? A man reading by the pool? A college student carrying a box into their home? A maintenance worker doing his job? The woman opened her mouth, but no words came. The weight of Eleanor's words hung heavy in the air. The young couple who had been whispering earlier spoke up. Yeah, I remember that, the man said. She made a huge deal out of it. A man in swim trunks crossed his arms. My wife and I saw what you did last week to that delivery guy. He was just eating his sandwich and you acted like he was casing the place. The security guard shifted uncomfortably. His eyes flicked to Michael, then back to the woman. He had come here expecting a simple case of trespassing. Now, he found himself in the middle of something much bigger. The woman's face was turning red, her anger flickering between frustration and desperation. She looked at the security guard as if expecting him to take her side. Instead, he cleared his throat. Ma'am, he said carefully, I don't think there's anything else for me to do here. His words landed like a final blow. Eleanor turned back to Michael, her expression softening. I'm sorry you had to go through that, she said. It's not right and it's not fair. Michael nodded, grateful but still processing. Thank you. The woman's hands clenched at her sides. This is ridiculous, she muttered. But the conviction was gone. She turned on her heel, snatching her bag from the lounge chair, and stormed out of the pool area. A beat of silence followed. Then someone clapped, started slow, hesitant. Then another, and another. The applause swelled, not loud, but firm in its message. Michael exhaled, the weight of the afternoon settling over him. He had walked into the pool area expecting peace. Instead, he had become the unwilling center of a confrontation that had nothing to do with proof of residency and everything to do with something much deeper. But now, standing amidst his neighbors, people who had once been strangers but had chosen to speak up, he felt something shift. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about all of them. And the world was about to find out. Michael sat on his couch later that evening, the soft hum of his ceiling fan the only sound in the apartment. His phone rested on the coffee table, its screen flashing with notifications faster than he could process. Texts from friends, emails from coworkers, mentions on social media. It was all happening too fast. He scrolled through his messages, pausing when he saw a link from his colleague, Eric. The caption above it was short but heavy with meaning. This is blowing up. Michael hesitated before clicking. The video opened, showing the entire confrontation from earlier that day. The camera had been steady, capturing every moment. The woman's sharp accusations, Michael's calm refusal to comply, Eleanor's unwavering defense, and the final applause that followed. The clip was only a few minutes long, but it was enough. The comments below the video scrolled endlessly. Some were supportive. Others were filled with outrage. A few dismissed the entire incident, calling it an overreaction. Michael leaned back, rubbing his temple. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't wanted to be at the center of anything. He just wanted to enjoy an afternoon by the pool. But now it was bigger than him. Across town, in the Magnolia Creek leasing office, property manager Lisa Delgado scrolled through the same video, her face growing more serious with each passing second. This wasn't just another complaint. This was something that could not be ignored. By morning, the video had gone viral. News outlets picked up the story, headlines flashing across screens nationwide. Racial profiling at Magnolia Creek sparks outrage. Elderly woman calls out apartment resident for harassment. Software engineer accused of trespassing at his own pool. Michael woke up to a flood of messages. Some were from people who had seen the video and wanted to offer support. Others were from journalists requesting interviews. There were even emails from brands and organizations offering him opportunities to speak about his experience. He wasn't sure how to feel. Meanwhile, the fallout for Deborah was swift. By midday, an anonymous post appeared in a community forum detailing more of her past behavior. The leasing office had already received multiple complaints about her over the years, but now there was undeniable proof. That afternoon, Lisa Delgado called both Michael and Deborah into her office. The tension in the small conference room was thick. Deborah sat stiffly in her chair, avoiding eye contact. Lisa folded her hands on the desk. "I've reviewed the footage," she began, her voice measured. "Deborah, this behavior is unacceptable. You have a pattern of targeting residents based on assumptions that have no merit. This is harassment, plain and simple." Deborah's jaw tightened. "I was just trying to keep the community safe." Lisa's expression remained neutral. Safe from what? Deborah's lips pressed together. She had no answer. "As of today, you are receiving an official warning," Lisa continued. "Any further complaints of this nature will result in the termination of your lease." Deborah sputtered, glancing between Lisa and Michael. She looked as if she wanted to argue, but the weight of the situation had finally settled in. "Fine," she muttered. She stood abruptly, snatching her purse from the chair, and stormed out of the office. Lisa turned to Michael. "I'm truly sorry this happened. If there's anything else we can do to support you, please let me know." Michael nodded. "Thank you." By the time he returned to his apartment, the story had only grown larger. The video had amassed millions of views. News anchors debated the broader implications of racial profiling. Activists reached out, offering him a platform to speak. Not all the attention was positive. Some people accused him of turning a misunderstanding into a spectacle. Others insisted Deborah had only been acting out of caution. Michael didn't let the negativity get to him. He knew what had happened. He knew what it meant. Back at Magnolia Creek, the ripple effects were undeniable. Residents who had once stayed silent about similar experiences now spoke up. Conversations started. People who had never acknowledged one another before now exchanged greetings in the hallway. Lisa took the feedback seriously. She organized community meetings, workshops on unconscious bias, and discussions about inclusivity. Michael watched as the complex, once a place of quiet division, began to shift. A week later, Eleanor knocked on his door. "You up for some baking?" she asked with a smirk. "I have a feeling we'll need a lot of cookies." Michael laughed. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. Change had started, and it wasn't stopping anytime soon.